All the way from San Francisco, we have Miss Priyanka Roy Chaudhary.
I think around mid 2000s to talk about legal tech, innovation, and automation to find 70 solutions to India's 20 socio-economic. I think that technology is not replacing lawyers.
So good evening, everyone. Today we're hosting a very special guest with us. All the way from San Francisco, we have Miss Priyanka Roy Chaudhary, an expert in legal research, corporate law, and legal writing. Miss Priyanka has pursued her LLB honors, BBA management, and JD from National Law University, Odisha. She has further pursued an LLM in law and technology and business law from the University of California, Berkeley. Ms. Priyanka is well versed with legal technology and currently works as a Codex Fellow at Codex, the Stanford Center for Legal Information. We are delighted to have you with us. So, you've worked in the legal tech industry in the United States for such a long time, and you would literally have seen the industry transform. Please tell us about your legal tech journey.
Thank you. Those are kind words, Mansi. And I must say that you exactly introduced me the way I asked you to. Just kidding. I'm really happy to talk with FindMind in analytics, and actually, I would like to go back in time a little to tell you how I started my legal tech journey. So while I was studying law and I was in my final year at National Law University, a professor from University of Washington, her name is Jane Kevin. She took a credit course for us, and I really started talking with her in the kind of work that she does in US. And she really encouraged me to write a paper under her, and she was working on Aadhaar and the digitalization of payment in India. And so I also wrote a paper on internet laws, which got published later on. And this experience really stayed because I was always interested in IP. But this also opened my avenue to internet laws and digitalization and how it can help the society in general. That's how it initially started, and then followed by my work at in the office of Mr. Gajendra Singh Shekhawat. We did a project on Mission Antyodaya, where what we did was that we had a team which we and had a core team, and we led a group of interns of, I think there were around 40 of them, and we had to find 70 solutions to India's 20 socio-economic issues by interlinking different state policies and accessing this huge data to do this policy making really got me inclined into automation, and I felt that a lot could be done by machines. It's not necessarily that we need to do and read and process all of it. And I started researching more, and I decided to do my master's from United States, and I chose UC Berkeley because my thesis project got approved by Professor Burgess, with whom I wrote a paper on AI and blockchain conversations. And right before I started my LLM journey, I went to Stanford to do a course on understanding US IP law, and it was a week of fantastic learning from different professors coming from around the world and Stanford. And that's how I also incidentally started working at Codex. And Codex is a center where you actually work on computational law, you work on automation, and you really work on different projects. Each fellow has different project and different inclination and areas, but all of them are related to simplifying law. And there are basically five areas that I would say where legal tech industry completely transformed. But before I talk about that, I feel it's how it always started. I think around mid 2000s. relate a talk about legal tech, innovation, and automation was where the concept of artificial intelligence and robotic lawyer came into being, and what can they do. And internet came a few years before, and uh, everything was still new. People were learning and still getting a grasp of it. But the kind of innovation which happened, especially in United States in 7 8 years, and I also see that happening in India right now. Um, it is related to coming out with different solutions in making it easier for lawyers and what they do and how they do and how technology can make their work easier. And I feel there are the 5 areas that I was talking about that saw the major change and transformation in legal tech industry is related to legal infrastructure. When new tools and platforms came, there was the big data law where the natural language processing and machine learning techniques and all those aspects came into being. Next was online dispute resolution, and we see a big boom of that right now in COVID 19, because this is a phase where everybody realized that nobody thought about it before that actually judges can give different judgments while recording from a certain place, and you don't need to be in person in courts to really do that. And so ODR really played a great role. Next is legal research, and in India, especially, we have seen in our law schools, we had Manupatra and LexisNexis, and the kind of legal research tools and websites that came along. Uh, I think the level has definitely increased, and how you can actually search different cases and research questions. But I think legal research has changed the working of legal industry, legal practitioners, professors, students, and I think finally the computational law, which is related to rules driven and data driven artificial intelligence, which actually mechanize your legal design and legal decision making. Yeah, and I think the kind of transformation that we have seen coming along in last few years, it's absolutely great. And I think I would say it's just a start, because this lockdown has given new opportunities and new ideas and open avenues in technology.
I must say that that's quite a journey, and legal tech has definitely transformed a lot since 2000. So, do you think that it's important for legal firms to adopt legal technologies and automation in today's world?
Yes, I definitely think that it's important for law firms to adapt, and I think they are adapting. Um, uh, Unconventional thinking led to impactful innovations in Cyril Emerson and Mangal Das's Vichar, and where they had powerful ideation week, empowering every member of law firm to really contribute to the journey of innovation. And they also had this Prarambh, which is I think it's India's first legal tech incubator, which is not only bringing a revolution in the domestic legal market, but also increasing collaboration and sharing of ideas with related to AI and different tech around the world. And they have also implemented Kira, which is their artificial intelligence tool, to understand firms' style of drafting and executing it so well, and they're teaching their teams to start learning to use it. And the main thing what I feel that legal technology does is that it really enhances the quality of work, and as lawyers we are meant to do the legal reasoning and thinking and not the mundane task, so that task gets automated. We have the basic contract drafting or client related clients have a lot of questions and answers that can be fulfilled by different bots which can do that easily. So the main thing is actually adapting to those technologies, and tools and learning, and bringing in the experience in your law firm. And definitely in West, you see that happening a lot in law firms. Um, and the change is slow, but yes, it has started happening in India, and I'm very happy to see that firms have started using these technologies.
So legal tech is definitely a blessing to lawyers. So, since we're on the topic of technology, would you please explain what Stanford's Codex Center does?
Yeah, so Stanford Codex Center is a computational center at Stanford where they have researchers, fellows, lawyers, entrepreneurs, technologists who work side by side and advancing with the frontier of legal technology. Uh, Everyone is really trying to bring new levels of legal efficiency and adapting different technologies and tools and in automation. And this also increases, I feel, the transparency and access to legal systems there is, and also an aspect of legal tech justice and access to justice, where we are really trying to help lawyers and also at the same time thinking about the clients because fees of lawyers it's really high in US. Lawyers have billing hours, so every hour is important. So if you really what technology does is that it really helps in transformation of your law firm and uh, really making the lawyers focus on what's important and just not doing everything that's uh, related to basic contract drafting or anything like that. And Codex does emphasize on research and development of computational law, which is the branch of legal informatics. It's related to automation and mechanization of legal analysis. And mostly Codex projects are in three areas related to legal document management, legal infrastructure, and computational law. And fellows are working on the independent projects or collaborating together. So one of the projects that I'm working on right now, it's known as Codex RegTrax project, where we are working on analyzing blockchain regulations worldwide and trying to create a dialogue around it. So yeah, those are different kind of projects I'm working on.
Yeah, so it sounds like a wonderful place to work in. So, as you mentioned AI, do you think development in AI can affect the law profession?
No, I don't think so. I don't believe in that at all. I think that technology is not replacing lawyers, but it actually replacing some of the most basic contract drafting and client answering related works, where earlier they were done in a more traditional manner. But since legal technologies has come into scene, I've seen in last few years there are lawyer enhancing areas where lawyers are getting to do work that they really wanted to do. Lawyers are increasing their expertise and skills to deliver to their clients in the best way possible. And one of the major things that's important for clients is related to predictability, cost effectiveness, and transparency. So that's what law firms and lawyers are trying to fulfill right now. And technology does play an important role in this sphere, but it's also not right to go on in the traditional path and not adapting yourself to current technologies because businesses without technology can be a huge risk to lawyer. And the world is currently changing so fast that it's important to really know what you can do with technology, and that will also save you.
I completely agree with you. So we have to keep moving with technology, but we can't let it completely replace us, because that's not possible. So, what according to you is blockchain technology?
Um, blockchain technology, in very simplest terms, would be where a lot of parties who want to work on one central database, and they have one transaction that is entered on the database, which cannot be ever altered or updated by anyone else. And even if one person tries to do that, that information goes to each and every person who is part of that database, and that makes it really hard to change or uh, really that's the essence of blockchain, because that makes blockchain really easy and efficient and transparent and a trustable source. So for example, to understand it in a better way, we can see that if there's a person who requests for a transaction, that requested transaction is broadcast to it to a peer-to-peer network that consists of that one center database, and there are a group of computers that are known as nodes. And then there's the step of validation by the network of nodes, those computers, and that does validate the transaction and the user status using those algorithms. Then the verified transaction also involves cryptocurrency, contracts, records, other information. It gets verified, and once it's verified, the transaction is combined with other transactions to create a block of data for the ledger. And that simple data is also which just becomes a part of metadata, and then the new block is then added to existing blockchain, and it's a way that is permanent, it's unalterable, and that's what blockchain is. That it's a distributed ledger, it's digital, it's updated in real time, there are fewer third parties, it operates in a trustless manner, it's irreversible, auditable, chronographical seal, and chronologically timestamped. So I think it's one of it's an amazing technology, but it's hard to understand. And if it's used, it can really make the basic ledger system that can be used in different aspects, also in a law firm or different places, and a very secured system. And yeah, it's high time that we actually start using the technology.
So that was very informative, and I really feel like blockchain technology can create a lot of impact in the legal industry. So, as we're on the topic of emerging technologies, why do you think young practitioners should learn about emerging technologies, and how can one learn about legal design specifically?
Emerging technologies is nothing but the latest technological advancement that are happening in legal tech. So it includes blockchain and artificial intelligence. It has aspects of privacy, big data. There is natural learning processes and machine learning processes. So it's emerging technology really makes the work of lawyers easier to really understand and know the technology, and using those technologies in their own work sphere and making their work easier. So either they use blockchain technology to really make their work secure and to have a very transparent ledger system to keep track of all what they're doing, or actually adapting it in different legal tech ideas as well. Entrepreneurs find it an amazing technology to really use for. Followed by artificial intelligence, because you have bots, and like I have one of my projects where I'm teaching Alexa different IP skills. So Alexa knows how to answer those questions related to copyright or patent, and that can be used by law firms to answer basic writing questions. So to understand and use these technologies in your own benefit, that's what is important for lawyers to do. And legal design is actually a fantastic way to really use legal and to teach legal, to understand legal and simplify law in a design aspect where you have all the concepts and you really make the other person understand and work around law using designing. There are companies like Lexigogo. It's a video contract app in Belgium where they actually you can come into a contract and really form simple contracts online on videos, and and they are valid contracts and it's so easy to use, like it's just you and me on video, and we get into a simple basic contract where you need to pay me something and you pay me through probably Google Pay, and that's there on the app, and we sign through DocuSign, and then that's a valid contract. It's also very good for people who really find it hard to read long contracts, and um, yeah, so those are really great way of an innovative way of looking into and approaching legal world and solving problems related to law, and also using legal design process. Lawyers think that legal and business ideas are to solve only legal tech issues, but once they do it in a time frame and significantly challenging the existing legal tech solutions, finding new solutions through diagrammatic representation. Big tech companies do that. They have meetings where you have legal design thinking processes and you have timed sessions to actually solve a concrete problem that you're facing. And the goal is to actively think through the technology, logistics, human factors of legal tech and solving those existing issues at hand. But all the legal design, it's relatively new. But there are appealing examples that you can find throughout the world and how this concept is being executed and used. So, and one of them being executed.
These ideas and projects, they sound so interesting. I'm sure a lot of us would, want to work in these fields. And so, Priyanka, since you also work with data, what are your projects in privacy, and what do you think is the importance of data privacy?
I work in privacy of smart speakers and other data privacy related projects. One of the projects at Stanford being on privacy of smart speakers, how smart speakers are actually probably not following or following privacy policies that they claim to say or do. So we analyze all the privacy policies of Google Home, Amazon's Alexa or Apple Siri, and then we talk with them and we see that how they are functioning and are they following kids' privacy policies or not, because those are specifically hard in United States and very strict. You need to follow the COPA laws, and there are a few specific legislations for kids' privacy. And data is also one of the most important assets in a company, and in tech companies, they find enormous value in collecting, sharing, using this data for data economy. And it's very important to really know, take care of, and also educate general people and companies about data transparency, how businesses need to request consent and abide by the privacy policy that they are asking their consumers or users to sign. And it's also very important to manage that data that comes along, and to have collected the trust on those data and accountability with their customers, partners, and who expect privacy. So privacy has a right to freedom, and it's right to an individual to be free of forced surveillance. And it's very important for one safety to freely express what they want to, having their own opinion behind closed doors. It's also part of, I think, right to living, and it's a very interesting field, and it's also a very important field to really take care of and look into what's happening in privacy. And like for example, right now in COVID-19, there are so many contact tracing geo applications where you need to download the applications, and they'll take your GPS or Bluetooth to really see that if you came in contact with an individual who had symptoms of coronavirus or not based on that. But they need to. It needs to be um, decentralized, not centralized. So you need to take care of the privacy and what kind of information do you ask from the user, and that's applicable to all the apps we have on our smartphone or on our laptops, social media platforms.
So data privacy certainly sounds like a very important tool. And as you mentioned, COVID 19, we can't ignore the fact that we're battling a pandemic right now. So, how do you think it will affect the legal sector? Will COVID 19 be make or break for the legal technology?
I feel it's a very critical time for us as a society, as an individual, and being part of startup community myself, I feel really sad to see a lot of businesses closing down, startup owners in huge debts, and it has impacted the legal tech sector, the legal sector, the normal technology sector, and all business sectors equally. And because of this pandemic. But it's also a way to create that will perhaps one of the most serious global economic crisis that any country would see. And probably after Great Depression that happened in 1929 and it lasted a decade. And then the global financial crisis happened in 2008 and in 2008. And it really led the companies to shift from permanent employment towards more contractual workers and led to the rising of temporary workers. And, uh, like in past 4 weeks, 17 million Americans have applied for unemployment benefits, and data in India is not available, but it really paints a dark picture, and it really uh, makes everyone feel that it's going to be hard and difficult for all of us. And especially for legal tech sector. But I do see that there are a few changes that are happening. The kind of office setting that have been changed, the law firms that they felt that they never can work without meeting their or facing their clients or working with their peers without meeting and without courts, without having sessions. But all those has changed, and they have. I think it has changed for good because technology came into being. And it has simplified and made it easier for people who are working from home. So I feel it's not exactly breaking the legal tech, but it's also hard for I think those lawyers who are small time lawyers who have very small firms. It's easier for big firms to bring on the technological changes and advancement that they need, but solo practitioners and small firms, it's not easy for them. So yeah, I think there is not just one answer to that, whether it will make or break for legal tech. But I think it has definitely changed the scenario of legal industry where legal tech is being more accepted, and being more it's people are making it part of their working system and adapting those technologies and tools more. But yes, it's not an easy way to do that. There are a lot of trainings that are involved. You need to learn. You don't have time to do all of that right now, or you don't have experts to guide you. So I think it has affected the legal market, I would say. But legal technology, people understood the importance of legal technology because they have seen how it helps.
Definitely. Even now, I read in a news article that COVID 19 is like the world war of economy. So we really can't ignore that all of us are suffering a lot. But definitely, I would agree that it has caused a lot of change in the way we see technology in the legal industry. So, with a lot of court cases on hold due to the COVID 19 pandemic, do you think that online dispute resolution can change the face of legal industry following this pandemic?
Yes, and all of us can see that happening right now. how judges are giving their judgment on video conferences and recording their statements. And one of the person I know, Sachin Mandan, who was part of Agami and that initiative, where they were talking about online dispute resolution. They also created a competition around it, and they worked around ODR more. And it's so fantastic that they have been talking about it since past few years now. And finally, due to COVID-19, people realized the need of it, and they actually thought that this is possible, and it's not just something plain on an idea on paper. And also disputes are a healthy and essential aspect of functioning of democracy and market. And our current system of platforms of dispute resolutions, whether they are courts or even out of court settlements, we haven't seen online dispute resolution happening much. And they're also not able to serve what they need to do, and serving, especially in India, of people like we are like the second largest populated country in the world, and the kind of court cases that are pending in different um, judicial platforms, they don't get cleared very soon. People have their cases going on for years. So in that factor, I do see that ODR plays a big role, because it can actually help you in advancing and clearing those pending cases, and solving the issue of people spending their money behind the civil cases for years and years, and probably in arbitration, and related to also there are misconceptions around mediation, and it's not also very popular at platform in India. But people realize that yes, arbitration, mediation, and ODR can play a big role, especially in such a pandemic. It helped us realize that and to really work towards unclogging the courts, and in such a large scale, and in such an effective and efficient manner. Um, and also, we need to create a trust around that. That's also very important. But that will take some time. But yeah, I think we are seeing a change. And also, one person that comes to my mind, Richard Susskind, who is working towards online courts, and he's writing about it since such a long time. Every his articles on why do we need to move to online courts, why is it necessary, and what can we do about it, how can we bring the changes. But finally, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, and uh, it says that 4 billion people live under the protection of law and courts, and in some countries the backlogs are astonishingly over 100 million cases. And and especially in countries like Brazil, the numbers are high, and it's 30 million in India. So even those countries, even the developed countries, which really claim that they have most advanced legal system, it really costs a lot. Takes a long time to pursue civil cases and go after your lawyers, and finally judges giving dates, and getting to a solution, and finding your final judgment. It sometimes lasts over a lifetime of a person as well. So access to justice is a problem, and this conventional court system is becoming increasingly unaffordable for people, and online dispute resolution can really help to solve.
Yeah, you've brought up some great points about online dispute resolution. And I'm sure, like, if the system speeds up the process of all these cases, we would be really grateful to it. So, my last question to you would you have any suggestions for young law students and legal tech entrepreneurs in today's time?
Um, I think I would just like to answer this question by telling a small story, not even a story, but my personal experience that how I always really worked hard towards getting the internships or participating in competitions or doing multiple things at a time during my law school, even post that. Even right now, it's not that I have still been able to understand how to do it in the best way, but I think it really takes a toll on you because you're doing so many things at the same time and you really want to be part of all those communities and all those committees and participating in group writing papers and applying for internships and preparing for interviews, drafting your CV, editing your work, and also studying, going to law school and doing all of that together. Uh, and the funny part that I was talking to a colleague of mine a few days back that funnily enough, I thought that doing all of that would really help me in my CV and talking to people. And right now I have a one-page CV where I actually don't even write a single internship of mine, which I did in India because you always write about your current work and what I'm doing right now, and maybe two more projects that we did up past that, and all those courses and credit courses and I don't know certificate courses and everything I did. I think the only thing that's mentioned is related that to is that I cleared India's bar exam and nothing is mentioned. It's all about the legal technology and the kind of projects I'm doing right now. So you always feel that this is the most important. If this and if I haven't got this internship, it will make or break my life. Or if I'm not able to get through a competition or my research paper doesn't get published, it will change my life. But it doesn't. Life moves on. So I would only say that really enjoy where you are, and don't do so much, and really actually explore what you want to do, learn skills, develop your expertise, but really take out time for yourself and have fun. I think that's the most important. And by doing that, you will anyway get to do what you love. And with time, you'll learn that what is there for you and what you really like. So yeah, believe and
That's so true, and I really feel that all of us need to accept and practice the thing that we need to take it easy, and we just don't need to obsess everything that we're doing now and then, because we're so pumped up about being a part of everything in college, clubs, chapters, internships, everything all at once. So thank you so much for such an insightful talk. And your experience in the field of law and technology is truly amazing. And I'm sure that all of us have learned a lot of new things today. So it was truly a pleasure to have you with us. Thank you so much.
thank you, Mans.